I would like to just share a few thoughts about the presence that we need to talk about in the presence of us here at church and in our lives. I was fortunate to be brought up in a Christian family. My grandparents were Christians, my parents were, and it was a habit for me to always go to church. There was never any thought of not going. You had to be really sick to not go to church. And that transferred to when we got married and we started raising our family. It was just an automatic thing. And we always developed a saying in our family when our kids went out into the world, so to speak, where they went to scouts or band or school or on a date. We always had a saying, remember who you are. And it became somewhat of a joke, but it was also very serious to remember that you're a Luther, because we had a good history of our Luther family, and also that you're a Christian, to remember who you are. In fact, it's transferred even to the next generation. My son-in-law, who has 4 children now, he even says, remember who you are. You're a Luther. And of course, they're all Kriegers. But it's somewhat in jest, but the thought is still the same. Remember who you are. It's important to remember who we are. Do any of you belong to other groups other than the church that we belong to? Let's see a show of hands. Probably everybody, right? You might be in a sewing group. You might be in an art group. You might be in a lodge. You might be in a Chamber of Commerce group. I happen to be in a flying club. And I'd ask the question, why do we belong to these various groups? Well, we want to learn. I've learned a lot by being around other people in my flying group. I've learned things that I didn't know before. We are sometimes asked to teach and to share what we've learned with other people. We want to grow in the topic and the subject that we're in, and we want to have fellowship. And that's true in our church. We want to grow. We want to be around other people that have the same thoughts and the same desires that we have. One of the sayings that I became aware of, I don't even know where I got it from, but we used it in the raising of our children, was this thought: we tend to become like those whom we are about. In other words, if you tend to hang around with the kids that are not the best of kids, you will tend to pick up their habits. And it's the same way in our church. We tend to, if we go out into the world and you're with people that don't have the Christian faith, they don't believe in Jesus, you will tend to pick up some of their thoughts, some of their actions perhaps. And that's why we need to gather together and be present in church to share that. I'll give you a couple examples. Bonnie and I ran some Subway restaurants, and we opened one in Ligonier, and the Subway restaurant was next door to the YMCA and very close to the junior high school. So after school let out, we often had the place filled with junior high kids, either going to the Y or coming from the Y or going to school, and we got to observe these kids in a little different setting than we might have at church. And I remember seeing different friends of ours, kids, who may have been with the wrong kinds of kids. And they tended to, you heard some language that you didn't like, and maybe some of the group smoked. And I remember, worrying about some of these kids, because I saw them in Sunday school and church, but then I saw them in this other setting, and they tended to pick up the habits of those children that they were associating with. And hopefully they would come to church, and hopefully these other kids were going to a church too. We also had some foster kids in our life, and we tended to see who they tended to be attracted to. I'll share one example with you. We had this young fellow who was in trouble, and he came to our house for a few months, and we took him to a football game. And the reason why we went to the football game was our daughter was and the son was in the band, so we tended to go to the games, and it was an away game. And I'll never forget, when we walked in, Bonnie looked at, there was this group of kids sitting out there next to the field, on the track, and they just looked really scruffy looking, kind of bad kids. And so we went and sat down, and we gave the fellow $1 to go to the concession stand to get a drink or something. And by golly, we looked over, and he was with that group. And we thought, oh my gosh, what's he doing hanging around with those guys? And so when he finally came back, we said, do you know those guys? He said, oh yeah. He says, I did time with them. I said, what? And he said, well, we were in a group home together. And so, you tend to become like those with whom you are about. I could give other examples. I know I went to Camp Allegheny. Bonnie went to Camp Allegheny. All of our kids attended Camp Allegheny at least once or twice, and I think Beth went about 7 times. And the importance of being present in an environment that would lead you to develop your Christian faith is so important. And that's why it's important to be in church and to take part in the activities, to be present with our Lord. So go out into the world and remember who you are, and remember we tend to become like those with whom we are about.